you can bank on is knowing that you're going to hear something new, original, and super fantastic. Your community and college radio station, 96.7 FM, Sudbury.
I want to welcome everyone back to the Learning Clinic on CKLU 96.7 FM. I'm your host, Bob Kerwin, and this is the fourth segment of our show today. In the studio with us we have Casey Lalonde, who is the Ontario Green Party candidate in the Sudbury riding. Unfortunately, Heather Dahlstrom wasn't able to join us, but we want to make sure that we got the Green Party platform in place too on the Learning Clinic, and so Casey is going to give us the fourth segment and talk to us about the Green Party and the election in general. So Casey, welcome to CKLU.
Thank you.
Can you maybe start off by giving us some general thoughts on the election, since you've been running a pretty tight schedule for the last few weeks, and you have a few days left. But I definitely want to get into the major issues that the Green Party is focusing on. But just start off. Is there anything in general that you?
So one of the main things I think I'd really like to address is just the election in general and why we're having it. I mean, this election was called because, the Conservatives and the NDP said we're not going to support the Liberal budget because of the scandals and everything that's been going on with the party for the last 10 years. This has upset a lot of people. It's upset a lot of voters and taxpayers, and people are just feeling generally apathetic. There's a lot of people who don't want to vote because, in their opinion, no matter who gets in, they're screwed. Like, it's not going to get better. And, I don't blame them for feeling that way because, as a student, I've seen what the Liberals have done to education over the last 10 years. I've watched my tuition fees go up quite significantly since I was in high school. Cause I used to check it all the time because, I didn't have a lot of money, so I'm like, how am I going to pay? Oh no, my fees keep going up. What's going to happen when I finally graduate? Really great scholarship programs and bursaries were axed, and then they introduced some new program called, the 30% off tuition grant, which doesn't apply to anybody. So, that's in addition to all the scandals and everything, people are just not happy, and a lot of people think that there's no options. One of the things I just want to emphasize is, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. If we keep voting in these three parties, we're going to have the same situation. We're going to have a government that doesn't work together, that's dysfunctional, they're not cooperating. So what we really need to do is just make history with this election and vote some Green MPPs in. I mean, we have a lot of great ideas for people, and we want to change the political scene in Ontario. We don't just want to bring our party platform to the table, we want to change the game, because right now there's too much corruption. There's too many scandals. It needs to stop, because we can't afford to be doing this. I mean, we can't keep losing billions of dollars of taxpayers' money in these random scandals when we don't have money for education or social assistance or other fundamental programs that people rely on.
No, that's it. So you're noticing that this disengagement of the public is a major issue in this election.
It is, and I mean, it's like I said, people are so upset they just don't want to vote, and that's probably one of the worst things that can happen to a democracy is when people stop participating.
Now, when you take a look at I don't like talking with the younger generation, but the newest voters, the people in university and in their 20s when they're just starting out in their careers, traditionally there's been a low voter turnout and very little interest in provincial and municipal and federal politics. Are you noticing that's changing, or is it the same level, or is it getting worse?
Personally, I feel like youth disengagement is getting worse. I feel like we're not being taught, when I was in high school, I had half a semester of civics education, and that was basically what I learned about politics. Other than what I learned from watching the news or watching Rick Mercer or other satirists. But they don't learn anything, and I really feel like people today are just so distracted by everything they're seeing in the media and, the so-called social media and all these different things that are competing for their attention when it comes to being engaged in the issues and understanding politics. there's no time, there's no attention for it, or people see all the negative things that are happening and they get disengaged. I mean, one of the things I'm dealing with right now, or that I'm noticing a lot of, is, now that it's the last few days of the election, everyone's coming out with their claws. They're all attacking each other. So you watch the, Liberal candidate in Sudbury, and he's attacking the NDP candidate about everything, and it's not constructive, it's not democratic, it doesn't really inform citizens. It's just like, don't vote for this guy because, X factor, because he did this wrong. But it doesn't actually give me an idea of how the government's going to get better. It's just kind of like fear-mongering.
So it's a matter of who not to vote for as opposed to who to vote for.
Yeah, and I find it very disconcerting when apparently our best option right now is the Liberals. Like, really, after everything, that's a really sad option. Like,
So I guess because are you still in school? Are you out of school? Are you?
yeah, I'm still in school for a while. I want to get a PhD in neuropsychology one day, so I have a while away to finish. I'm finishing my second undergrad. Next year I'll be graduating with my bachelor's in psychology. Unless, of course, I get elected, but who knows? We'll see what happens. And
So you're right in the mix of that generation that is being seriously and significantly affected by the policies of provincial government in terms of your tuition and your job creation and your career opportunities.
yeah, it's really interesting. One of the issues that the Liberals have brought up is they're like, well, people aren't saving enough for retirement, and it's a big issue. And I'm like, well, if you look at the fact that tuition fees have been on the rise since 1990, student debt has been increasing so much that they had to change the definition of debt at the federal level at one point because we hit the legislative mark. Like, the total student debt in Canada wasn't allowed to surpass a certain amount, and they had to, rewrite a few things because it hit that amount a few years ago. So, we have more and more people trying to pay off their education. You wonder why they can't save for retirement. Now you look at people my age where, the cost of going to school, now I've done these stats, okay, if you worked 40 hours a week at minimum wage for the 16 weeks prior to starting university in September, you would barely make enough to cover your tuition fees. That's if you save every cent and you don't spend it. So we're now in a situation where students can't really make enough money to pay their tuition. So they're going to have to either get someone to pay it or take on a loan to subsidize the cost, so they're putting themselves in debt. It's hard to find work. I mean, I have a university degree already. I have a lot of research experience. Like, I had pretty well-paying jobs in my past, and like I've applied to places and it's difficult, and like it's, so when you have that, you have unemployment, high debt, and then they just keep piling on, the tuition fees keep going up, they take away grants and scholarship programs. It's putting us all in a very precarious situation, and I feel like it's only going to get worse if we really don't deal with this now.
Does the Green Party have any kind of platform or policy towards education that they're?
Yeah, one of the things we would want to establish is like a youth opportunity fund, because there's a lot of young people out there that have really brilliant ideas that could really change society and make big changes in the world. But you need to invest in these people, right? So, having funding available for somebody to, say they, you have a student who's, really, really advanced in sciences, and they're like, hey, I might have some kind of breakthrough in the medical field, right? But you invest in them at a young age, and you can have these opportunities developed. And, another really important part of the Green Party platform, which isn't necessarily tied to education, but it will affect it, would be the guaranteed annual income. Because if you look at right now, we know what the poverty income cutoff is. It's a little over $1,900. So that's after tax. Before tax, it's about $22,000. I'm at $19,000, not $1,900. So if we establish that, okay, no person in Ontario can make gross less than, like $25,000 a year. Right, because you have to tie this to the cost of living and like a comfortable cost of living, because when you have somebody just chronically stressing to make ends meet, like that's not really a healthy way to live your life, and it's just going to create more problems down the road. This would help students, because I think a lot of students know what it's like to struggle trying to make ends meet, or to deal with OSAP and to deal with the constraints that you are facing when you're on OSAP, because it's much different being a student relying on, the Ontario Student Assistance Program than it is to be somebody getting their education funded up front. It's a completely different situation, and it really does affect, like, really keen aspects of your life, and sometimes it makes it just really difficult to just pursue your education altogether.
Yeah, and then trying to pick a career that's gonna have a spot for you when you get out.
Mm-hmm.
That's, so that kind of opportunity fund could alleviate some of these, entry level and startup.
Yeah, and also
Opportunities.
like investing in small businesses and local jobs, and also looking towards clean energy. I mean, we need to fund innovation if we're going to deal with a lot of our climate problems we're having. I mean, we need to find radical new alternatives to the ways that we're living now, and you're not going to be able to do that without people who are going to be able to become educated and come up with these new innovations.
Let's get into the energy platform. Energy is a big topic. Ontario, the Ontario election this year, it's huge. Where does the Green Party stand on energy in the future?
Well, our biggest stance, I would say the one we tend to push a lot, is for conservation. And it's kind of a simple concept. If you use less energy, you're going to pay less. So we would really encourage people to retrofit their homes. We provide tax subsidies, because not only would you end up, you conserve energy, you use less, but that creates jobs. Because, when you start investing in retrofitting homes or building more efficient homes, though, somebody has to work to get that done. Another thing too that we don't currently have is an east-west corridor to buy hydro from Quebec. Like, investing in that would be very helpful, obviously, because we could get power at a lower cost. And another big thing, which we really need to address, is that we have a surplus of off-peak energy that we have to pay the states to take from us because it would overload our grid. Well, why aren't we looking for a way to repurpose all that energy? Because if you think about it, say we repurpose it to create and store hydrogen. If you use hydrogen as fuel, the byproduct is clean water, not CO2 or something that's, harmful to human health. That would not only save us money, because now we're not paying people to take the energy, we're using it, but it creates jobs in the clean energy sector.
Yeah, what about wind power? Wind generated? Does the party have a platform or a position on wind generated power?
I think overall we're supportive of it, but we need to be strategic with how we use wind energy, because putting wind turbines on farms is never really the greatest idea. I went to a speakers panel on it, and we had a farmer there from Manitoulin Island, and because of the sound waves coming off the wind turbines, it can be really harmful to say the nearby bats. It explodes the capillaries in their lungs and they drown them with blood. Apparently, anyways, you can't, you don't want to be harming one species in that ecosystem because it harms the whole ecosystem. So by farms, not the greatest idea. There's also been reports of human health, negative effects from the infrasound. And we know this. I mean, the science is there. So I think with wind energy, we should utilize it where it makes sense, but we have to be strategic with where we put it. It's you wouldn't want to put solar panels somewhere where they're going to get buried in snow and you can't shovel the snow off, because then that would be kind of pointless.
You're right, absolutely. And it does some serious damage to the bird population as well, anywhere around the windmills, apparently.
Yeah, so it's just about being strategic and knowing where to put it.
What about the health? Health is one of the major areas of expenditure in the province. So does the Green Party have any kind of platform position on what they want to do with the healthcare sector?
Nothing specifically, but one of the major issues with healthcare is, one, we're not focusing enough on preventative medicine, which doesn't address the upfront cost right now, but it's something you need to do all these things concurrently, deal with the problems right now, but also focus on, minimizing future problems. So when you invest in, local food production, or you make sure that people aren't living in poverty, you're going to improve people's health. Investing in better education about nutrition and about health in general. I mean, when I was a kid, all I learned about was the Canada Food Guide, which didn't really teach me much. I mean, I've had to educate myself based on, everything books I've read and things I've read online. But yeah, I mean, just knowing, this basic science of nutrition would even make a difference for some people. But on top of all the preventative stuff, we need to look at where our healthcare costs are going. And right now we have an aging population, and we have a home care service that's it's inadequate. So, there needs to be more funding for home care, because people that have a chronic illness or are terminally ill or just, don't necessarily need to be in the hospital. Like, if they can be at home and have the care of a nurse practitioner come in, it's much more beneficial to them. But at the same time, the system needs to be improved. I mean, people need to make sure that they're being trained properly. There needs to be checks and balances in place to make sure that everything's running efficiently, that there's, check-ins, access to medical records is another big one. We don't have like a unified e-health system, and if you're able to access, let's say you're a nurse or a doctor and you can access somebody's medical records like right there on the spot, you would know like if they recently had some kind of medical injury or a trauma or there's a medication they need to be on. But we don't have that right now, so it kind of creates a lot of clogs. I'm trying to think anything else.
So when we take a look at the green philosophy in terms of conservation and allowing people enough of an income so that they can maintain their health and more preventative medicine, we really are kind of getting back to nature, aren't we, in terms of where we want to be focusing a lot of our activities. I know in the Sudbury area, we talk an awful lot about recreational activities and providing opportunities for people to engage in forms of recreation that are family friendly and not all that costly. I know you ride your bike quite a bit.
Yeah.
So when we get into that kind of transportation and providing opportunities, does the Green Party have any kind of large, plan or kind of philosophy with regards to public transit and using, carpooling and stuff like that? Is there anything that you're trying to do as an incentive to get people to think about those alternatives?
Well, one of the things, two of the big platform things, one would be having a dedicated revenue stream to establish better public transit. Like some communities, it's just, public transit in Sudbury is not that great. I mean, for anyone that rides a bus, sometimes the hours aren't that great, service isn't that great to outlying areas. But, the cities need funding to improve these services if they want people to use them. And it also is better for the economy because it reduces gridlock. I mean, just imagine 30 cars on the road and now put those 30 people in one bus. I mean, it's, you can visualize it pretty easily. You see the impact. And also, the reduction of pollution that comes after. Because if you've ever, I bike down the roads a lot. So when I'm stuck in traffic and there's lots of exhaust, it doesn't feel good when you're breathing it in. So it's probably not good for you. And then another thing would be giving municipalities funding to create or improve cycling infrastructure. And it's really important because, if you go to you go to Europe, and you go to Paris, people cycle all the time. It's normal and it's expected. And, you wouldn't be getting run off the road or having people tell you to get on the sidewalk, which is, something that also really needs to be dealt with. Like, cyclists cannot be on the sidewalk. It's not safe for them or the people walking. And I'm a pedestrian as well as a cyclist, so when I'm on the sidewalk, I don't want somebody biking by me. Sometimes it's very unsettling. But, these are major priorities for the Green Party because we know how important public transportation is. And active transportation, also very important.
Any idea of, where you get the funding for these new initiatives, or is it boiled down to finding efficiencies within the current system?
We're already collecting these funds. Like, when you collect, gas tax, which is essentially, then put into building roads, it's just one, finding efficiencies, but then also just dedicating, for cycling would be 2% of that budget goes towards it. One of the things I've been saying, which is kind of a cheap shot, but if the Liberals are finding $1 billion to, for this scandal that just happened, I think personally there's money to improve public transit, there's money to improve active transportation, I think there's money to invest in education. We're just not utilizing our taxpayers' money efficiently. I'm sorry, but if $1 billion disappears into the pockets of a corporation because, I don't know what happened, but the government obviously made a huge mistake, then there's money to fund other things.
Absolutely. So what are some of the other issues that you've been finding as you've been going in this campaign?
Well, I guess like I said, the major issue is just people are not happy right now. That's really the biggest one.
Did they say the Green Party as an alternative, as an option?
You know what? It's the mass media is not saying that. They're like, there should be none of the above. The three parties. I'm like, well, there's four parties. I mean, vote for the Green Party. Like, the thing is, you're not going to get the change you want to see in government if you keep electing the three parties that have been causing all these problems since the beginning. But I mean, like, there's other issues that the Green Party has stances on. They're not talked about. Like, I was in a Northern Life debate, and they asked me, how come the environment's not talked about? So I told them, I said, it's a complex issue, and, you can't really get into a detailed debate or conversation about the environment when we're too busy attacking each other. And then Paula Prony turned around and started attacking Joe Cimino about something completely unrelated. So it's like, well, there you go. But, here's another example, like, local food and farmland production. No one's talking about it, but it's a huge issue.
It is. Here it is a huge issue. What should we be talking about?
Well, one, we have to protect our prime farmland in southern Ontario. I mean, like, if we're able to grow a lot of local food in Ontario, it's going to be in southern Ontario, not in the north, because the farther north you go, you can't really grow anything. But, when we're looking at farmland, like, those are something we can pave over and develop, and we're only thinking about short-term economic, growth, like building, I don't know, condos or something. You don't realize that, like, these buildings are nice, maybe they help the economy, who knows, but you know what, you're not going to survive very long without food. And I think the less we shouldn't be relying on other countries, like, say, like California or just anywhere else, for our food supply, because it's not safe. Because if you look at climate change, the way that it'll affect certain areas, like, there might be a serious drought or flooding or somewhere, and if we're relying on those people to grow our food and they can't, then we're going to have food shortages. You look at California produces most of our food. Well, California's on a fault line, so if you know anything about fault lines, they're very unstable. It's like the geology is just unstable. They're prone to earthquakes and, at random, there's no telling. So, something serious happens there, or because they are in a coastal city, and if the ocean levels keep rising, they're going to get flooded out. If we're relying on them to produce most of our food, that's kind of a problem when there's a food shortage. So we shouldn't be destroying our ability to produce food locally for our own consumption, in the name of, short-term economic growth.
I've noticed that the Green Party seems to be the only party that's talking about the amalgamation of school boards into one education system.
Yeah, that's another big party platform too. That it's a little controversial, but I mean, and for me, it's like it's semi-difficult because I did go to Catholic schools and I grew up Catholic, and at one point it was really important to me, but at the same time, we're a growing multicultural society, so it's kind of questionable when we have, the public school system, and then we have a Catholic school system all funded by the government, but then if you wanted any other, religious, faith-based school system, they're going to have to pay private fees. So, what should we do? Should we publicly fund all religious schools? Or why are we, this, people need to understand that this, the whole Catholic school thing goes back to, like, the late 1800s. Like, it made sense at that time, but now the demographics aren't really, I wouldn't say that they're, like, if, we keep becoming more multicultural and we have more religious denominations in Ontario, it's just still, I think it's just going to create kind of an awkward situation where we're favoring one religion over all the others, but at the same time, there's a lot of opposition to this, and I think, it would be a little bit trickier than, just merging them, because it would, it would create a lot of, there might be, there would be backlash, obviously, but, yeah, it's tricky, but, it's right, it's one of the biggest things in our platform right now. I think the idea, really what we're trying to do is find efficiencies at the top so we can put money back into the classrooms, which I think is what people need to take away from this, because, we're constantly facing situations where, what do? We gotta save money, so now kids have bigger class sizes, they have less instructional assistants, they have less funding for activities, and, that doesn't help students. Bigger classes don't help students. I had big classes as a kid, and I'm telling you, it was not a good situation when you have 30 plus kids in a class, and they're all hyperactive, and they all want to, they're kids. So we need to try and move away from that, but, you know, it doesn't seem to be where we're going.
So that we don't miss anything in our last 5 or 10 minutes, are there other issues that you want to make sure we don't miss as we put this together? Because again, everybody seems to talk about the three parties, but the Green Party has been around, and I think the Green Party has candidates in pretty much
All 107 writings.
so you've got all 107 ridings in there, so and I think you are trying to present an alternative to what people have called the mainstream parties. So is there anything else, even small, even what you call small, because I think in some cases the smallest of issues sometimes are getting in the way of the bigger issues. It's you know, a small leak in a boat can sink a ship just as much as a big leak.
Yeah, exactly. Well, one of the things that's been getting thrown around a lot in this election has to do with the Ring of Fire. And it's frustrating to me because, you know, they're only using the big buzzwords. They're like, Ring of Fire, we have lots of resources, and there's jobs. And that's it. That's all they're talking about. You know, they're like, oh, we have a really big chromite deposit. Okay, well, let's not tell the public about the risks of mining chromite, which are very real, and the data and the scientific literature supports it. I mean, you can just you can search this on the internet and find out what happens when you mine and manipulate chromite, okay? So, let's do a little story on it. So basically, chromite, it's stored, you know, it's part of the landscape, it's in the ground. But once you take it out, okay, of the ground, it changes from its state, which is chromium-3, which is, you know, one of the isotopes, to chromium-6. There's hexavalent chromium. That's a very, okay, so chromium-6 or chromium-3 is unstable. Chromium-6 is stable, but it's also a class 1 carcinogen. And if you've ever seen the movie Aaron Brockovich, the town, you know, they were all sick and they're like, oh, what's wrong? They found out they had hexavalent chromium in the water.
Oh, and really? Is that what?
That's what it was, okay? And here's the thing, it doesn't, like chromium will react with manganese, which we have in our tailings ponds here in Sudbury, and anything other than a pH of 7. Okay, so anything basic or acidic, and we know that we have acidic soil in Sudbury. And yeah, and also like the way that it's smelted, there's a very specific type of smelter. It's like a closed submerged arc smelter. There's research on this. I don't want to go into too much detail so I confuse people, but you have to be careful about how you smelt it because you need to contain it as much as possible, even transporting it, right? It needs to be transported in closed carts. I mean, like, if you just have, like, chromium exposed in the air, it's going to oxidize, and we're going to risk putting that carcinogen in our water. But that has not, the only reason I've learned about that is through my involvement with the Green Party, and I've looked it up myself, I've read the data, and personally, I think it's terrifying. The more, you know, and it's so annoying when they're like, oh yeah, you know, we're going to fight to get the chromite smelter in Sudbury. I'm like, if you guys get a chromite smelter in Sudbury, I'm leaving. One of my colleagues in the Green Party wants to move out of this town. If we get that smelter here, it's just not, like, I don't know if the people who are investing in this are going to actually do it properly and safely to ensure that we don't end up as that town that has hexavalent chromium in our water or in our land. I mean, this is something that, like, yes, it's a big mineral deposit, and it seems like it's going to be great, you know, it's going to create jobs, it's going to bring money in, but
You don't want the smelter here.
Well, we shouldn't, for all intents and purposes, we shouldn't have the smelter here, but it's not even about the smelter, it's about mining it, it's about transporting it. You know, and the fact that the value of chromium has been steadily going down since the mid-90s, you know why? Because we know what the risks are associated with it. I mean, we know, you know, so people are trying to find alternatives to this mineral. You know, we're not trying to find more of it and exploit it more because we know how harmful it is. So, you know, I'm not saying that we shouldn't mine it. I'm not saying we shouldn't develop the Ring of Fire. What I'm saying is people, first of all, need to know what the real risks are. It's completely unfair and undemocratic that people in Ontario are being kept in the dark about, you know, the little secret behind this Ring of Fire. What does it actually mean for people? And all of the investments that would have to go into developing this. I mean, it's not like we're just going to pop up a mine and pop up a smelter and call it a day. I mean, it's going to be a huge investment. We have to make sure we're doing our research. And it's costly. Mining chromium is very costly. Like, when you do it properly, and you consider the energy expenses, and, you know, you have to invest in a very high-tech, you know, state-of-the-art, like, mining operation and smelter, like, how much money you're gonna turn around, like, in profits from this. When you look at the real costs, I think, and so it's like I said, I'm not saying don't do it, okay? I don't want to say that, but I just want people to be aware of what we're actually talking about here, because really, if it's just about creating jobs, I can give you 500 ideas on how to create jobs that don't involve, the potential threat of a class 1 carcinogen in your water and my water.
Wow, I mean, that's an Aaron Brockovich revelation. I've never heard of that. But I mean,
nobody's heard of it.
You're into basically the study of sciences too, so yeah, you can, you explained it very clearly. There's a danger once it's out of the ground.
It is, and I've looked up, I've been looking up the data because if, someone questions me on it, I want to be able to, rebuttal that. But personally, I honestly can't emphasize enough how much it scares me. I feel like politicians are constantly trying to just use these buzzwords to say, okay, well, we need jobs, so we need this. We need this operation here, otherwise there's no jobs. I'm like, well, I don't think it comes down to that. Look at this. We could invest in Laurentian. I think anyone part of the university community knows Laurentian needs some funding. My first degree in sociology can attest to that, okay? But if you think about it, say we need a new science building. You invest in the university, you build a new science building, creates jobs. It attracts more students to the town. More students in the town spending money means it's better for the local economy. Small businesses would probably agree that when there's more students in town, they make more money because there's a surplus of many thousands of people here. So, and that's just one example. We can create jobs without, having to rely on this just one industry.
Very good. Any other issue? That's an interesting one. I'm glad it's on tape. Any other issues that come to mind? We've covered an awful lot during the conversation, but
yeah, I guess well, maybe the last one I could point out would, since we were talking about mining, is, getting these companies to pay a fair share of the resources they're extracting,
okay.
Right? a lot of money leaves Sudbury every day, and I have to question how much of it we're seeing and how responsibly that money is being handled when you look at, I'll give you an example, when, so you have a mining company taking resources out and they're making a profit off of it, but then we get a certain royalty, but we're getting a very low royalty. And we need that tax money. For example, we need it for our roads. The reason why our roads in Sudbury are so bad is because we have these huge, heavy trucks full of ore on them going in and out of the city every day. And it puts a lot of stress on the highways. And if you pay attention to the road construction, I'm a cyclist, so I experience it firsthand. Trust me, when you hit a pothole on your bike, it is the most terrifying thing sometimes. So, Falcon Ridge Highway, they just redid it a few years ago. I used to bike down it all the time, and all of a sudden it's full of potholes again. I couldn't believe it. Well, I don't know what happened. They maybe didn't build the roads they needed to at first, or they didn't put, in some parts in Sudbury, they don't, this is a whole other issue. They don't put the pipes in. So then there's water main burst, they gotta tear up a new highway. It's just a disaster. But the point is, we need to be collecting a higher royalty from these companies. If they're gonna be mining in our communities, we need to get a fair share of those resources because we need that money. We need it to redo our roads all the time. Sudbury needed to re-green the whole city after what happened with our first mining operations. The city looked like the moon, and you can still see it. I went out for a hike the other day, and I don't know, the black rocks, and they're all scratchy. It's, those impacts, we re-greened it, but it's still there. And that's just something that, it's another example of, mining companies come in, and then they harm our environment, and we have to clean up for it. So, we do need to be getting a fair share.
Those last two issues you talked about are kind of major, and they are things that people are pushing for. It's been great. You've covered an awful lot of issues. Like the Green Party is sometimes only seen as a one-issue party. It's all for conservation and getting back to nature. But really, what you're saying is it now becomes an alternative that voters have, as opposed to the three parties that they've been electing over all of these years.
Well, it's like I said, what's the definition of insanity? Personally, I don't like the current Ontario government. I'm so not looking forward to, I'm really hoping that we get a couple Green MPPs in, there's a good chance, and I'm really, really hoping that we do, because we need their voices in the legislature, but I don't know. Like I don't have a lot of faith in any of these parties. I mean today, like it's funny. I commented on the Liberal candidates, like on his Facebook page. It was just he posted something about nuisance bears, being like, "Oh yeah, I would support the bear hunt," and it was another issue, so I commented. And then about 2 seconds later, it was deleted, and I was blocked from commenting. And I'm like, you know what? These things need to stop. Like these politicians are so dead set in their ways, and they can't even have an argument. You can't disagree with them. As soon as you disagree, they take it off. Well, like, you know what? If someone wants to go on my page, disagree with me, go ahead. We'll argue. I love arguing. But I'm not going to delete it because you don't agree with me. That's not how I am, and I don't think it's very democratic to do so. But again, like, what kind of government are we going to be electing? You know, ones that just continue the same old tactics and that don't want any opinions that don't agree with theirs. So, I don't know. I don't see a group of people who are going to end up working together.
Well, at least you're out there with your voice.
Yeah, trying.
Well, that's really good. Casey, thank you very much for coming in. It's nice to have all four viewpoints and all four parties.
Thank you.
And on the learningclinic.ca, under the radio section, this interview as well as all of the others, and also the taped candidate meetings are also on that same section, so people can actually see the Northern Life and the Chamber debates.
Oh,
and
good.
And the provincial one, plus I've got everything all on the same page, which is, you can just scroll down.
That's great. I really enjoyed the Chamber debate
Yeah.
and the Northern Life debate.
Yeah. So it's a place anywhere where everything has been kept, and the whole purpose is to educate people, and hopefully they'll be better informed, and when they go to vote on the 12th, they're making an informed vote and
Yep.
choosing the party that they feel is going to best represent the Sudbury riding and the Nickelville riding. So.
And I always like to just emphasize, my bit, you know, I want Sudbury to make history and vote their first Green MVP, but also don't just vote for the party or vote against a party, or, you know, vote for somebody you think is going to best represent you. You know, because that's ultimately what you're getting. I mean, you know, when you elect your member of parliament or your member of provincial parliament, you're voting for that person. You know, obviously they're tied to their party, but at the same time, like, you want somebody that's going to get up and advocate for you, for your city, not just somebody that's going to be, you know, unheard in the House.
Very refreshing, and probably a perfect place to end the 4 different sessions we've had this afternoon. It's great advice. Go and vote for the person you think is going to best represent you and advocate for your best interests. Casey Lalonde, thank you very much running for the Ontario Green Party in the Sudbury riding. And I want to thank everyone for listening to the show, for listening to the Learning Clinic this afternoon. I'm your host, Bob Kerwin. Stay tuned to CKLU for some more good music this afternoon.
It's pretty healthy, but